Right now, there is probably someone in your life who knows exactly how much you care. They know how quickly you reply. They know which messages you answer immediately and which ones you pretend not to notice. They know what happens when they become distant. They know whether you chase, whether you explain, whether you apologize, whether you try to fix the mood when they suddenly become cold. And you probably think they're just being difficult. Maybe they are, but sometimes something else is happening. They've learned what your attention is worth because you taught them what happens when they take it away. That sounds harsh. It is, because people don't only respond to what you say, they respond to what consistently works. If ignoring you makes you chase, they learn that distance has power. If criticism makes you defend yourself, they learn that criticism gets access to you. If withdrawal makes you panic, they learn that withdrawal moves you. And once someone learns exactly what moves you, they don't need to control you. They only need to press the right button. You do the rest. That is why stop caring is often misunderstood. It doesn't mean becoming heartless. It doesn't mean pretending you don't love anyone. And it definitely doesn't mean playing some childish game where you disappear just to make someone miss you. That's not detachment. That's still caring, just in disguise. Real detachment is different. It begins when their reaction stops determining your behavior. And that is where this gets interesting, because someone can still matter to you without controlling you. Machiavelli understood a version of this problem centuries ago. He wasn't writing relationship advice. He was studying power, incentives, loyalty, fear, appearances, and what people do when circumstances change. One of the broader lessons is uncomfortable but useful. Never assume that goodwill alone will keep a relationship stable. When the incentives change, people respond to circumstances, and when the circumstances change, behavior can change with them. By the end of this, you'll see exactly where caring turns into dependence, where attention becomes leverage, and how to take that leverage back without becoming cold, cruel, or manipulative. Because the goal isn't to make someone panic. The goal is to become so internally steady that their panic is no longer your responsibility. And the first place that starts is with the thing most people mistake for love. Shift 1. Stop chasing the change. You've probably been told that when someone pulls away, you should communicate. Sometimes that's true, but there is a difference between communication and chasing emotional certainty. Someone's replies suddenly become shorter. Yesterday they were warm, today they're distant. So you ask what happened. They say, nothing. You can feel something is wrong, so you ask again. Then you explain yourself. Then you try to make them laugh. Then you send another message, because the previous one feels too cold. And now you're not communicating anymore. You're managing their reaction. That distinction matters, because the moment another person's mood becomes something you feel responsible for repairing, their mood has acquired control over your behavior. You don't even need them to ask for anything. Their silence does it. Their distance does it. Their change in tone does it. And you've probably done this without realizing it. You've seen someone become colder and immediately started wondering what you did wrong. You replayed the conversation. You checked the message. You analyzed the punctuation. You looked at how long they took to respond. And while you're doing all of that, you've already handed them something valuable, your attention. The problem isn't caring that someone is distant. The problem is assuming their distance requires an immediate reaction from you. Sometimes it does. You don't know yet. So stop trying to solve uncertainty with movement. Let the change exist. Don't chase it. Don't punish it. Don't manufacture your own distance to get a reaction. Just observe, because when you stop automatically repairing every shift in someone's behavior, you finally get to see whether they were genuinely moving away or whether they simply expected you to chase them back. That's a very different question, and once you stop chasing the change, you notice something even more revealing. How much of your behavior was built around getting a reaction in the first place? Comment this if you're done chasing what you didn't break. I don't chase the change, because the next problem is even deeper. Sometimes you don't chase the person, you chase their approval. Shift 2. Stop using their reaction as your mirror. You think you want their opinion. Sometimes you actually want permission. There's a difference. You make a decision. You feel good about it. Then someone you care about reacts badly. Suddenly you're questioning everything. Was I wrong? Did I say it badly? Should I change it? Maybe I should explain. Maybe I should compromise. Maybe I should just do what they wanted. And sometimes changing your mind is the intelligent thing to do. The problem is when you don't change because their argument was better. You change because their disapproval feels unbearable. Now their reaction isn't just information, it's a measurement of your worth. That's dangerous, because once someone realizes their approval can move your decisions, they don't have to control you directly. They can simply withhold approval. A colder response, a disappointed look, a little distance, a sentence like, "I thought you were better than that." And suddenly you're defending yourself, not because you believe you did something wrong, but because you want the discomfort to disappear. That is where caring turns into dependency. You don't need everyone to agree with you. You need to know whether disagreement actually contains information. So next time someone reacts badly to something you've chosen, don't immediately ask, "Are they upset with me?" Ask, "Did they actually change my reasoning?" If the answer is no, let them disagree. Let them be disappointed. Let them have an opinion you don't adopt. That's not arrogance. That's psychological independence. And here's the uncomfortable part. You may have spent years calling yourself considerate when what you were really doing was managing other people's emotions so they wouldn't withdraw their approval. That's not kindness anymore. That's self-abandonment. You can care about someone without letting their emotional response become your decision-making system. I don't need approval to trust myself. And once you stop using their reaction as your mirror, another form of control becomes much easier to see: their urgency. Shift 3. Stop responding on their clock. Urgency feels important. It isn't always. Someone sends you an angry message. You feel your heart rate change. You want to respond immediately. You start typing, delete, rewrite, send. Then they respond. You answer again, and suddenly their emotional state has dictated the entire pace of your evening. You didn't choose the conversation. They created the tempo, and you followed it. That's the hidden power of urgency. The person who can make you respond immediately can influence what version of you shows up. The rushed version, the defensive version, the emotional version, the version that says things it wouldn't say after 20 minutes of calm. And this is where you need to become more disciplined. Not slower because you're playing games. Slower because you want your own brain back before you decide what to do. Read the message, put the phone down, walk away, come back later, maybe respond, maybe don't, because sometimes the strongest response isn't a better argument. It's realizing that the situation doesn't deserve your immediate participation. You don't have to answer every accusation. You don't have to correct every misunderstanding. You don't have to prove yourself on demand. And you certainly don't have to let someone else's emotional emergency become your emergency. Think about how different that feels. Someone is angry. You remain calm. Someone demands an answer. You take your time. Someone tries to pull you into an argument. You decide whether the argument is even worth entering. Nothing supernatural happened. You simply stopped allowing urgency to make decisions for you. And if you're honest, you've probably given away more control through rushed reactions than through any major mistake, because people remember what consistently gets a reaction. And when they know they can create urgency, they know they can create movement. So create space, not to make them nervous, to make your own thinking clearer. I choose my timing, but timing isn't the only thing people can use. Sometimes the real leverage is much closer: your access. Shift 4. Stop giving everyone the same version of you. You've been told that being available means being caring. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it means you're afraid of what happens when you're not. You answer every message. You explain every decision. You share every detail. You make yourself emotionally available to people who haven't earned that level of closeness. And then you wonder why their reactions affect you so much. Of course they do. You've given them a front row seat. The mistake is thinking boundaries mean shutting people out. They don't. Boundaries are filters. They tell you who gets access, how much, and why. Someone can know you without knowing everything about you. Someone can be close to you without having unlimited access to your time. Someone can matter to you without being entitled to every thought running through your head. That's not cruelty. That's proportion. Think about your phone. Not everyone gets the same password. Not everyone gets the same access. You don't give a stranger the keys to your house because they smiled at you. Yet people routinely give emotional access to someone simply because they were kind for a few weeks. Then they become confused when that access gets used against them. So stop treating openness like a moral obligation. Let trust develop. Let consistency prove itself. Let people earn deeper access through how they handle the access they already have. And if someone repeatedly mishandles it, you don't need a dramatic announcement. Reduce it, quietly. Less information, less availability, less emotional exposure, not revenge. Calibration, because caring doesn't require unlimited access. And once you understand that, you start noticing another trap, the need to explain yourself. Comment this if you're changing how you protect your attention. I decide who gets access. Shift 5. Let them misunderstand you. Most people think explaining yourself creates clarity. Sometimes it creates dependence. Someone misunderstands you. You explain. They misunderstand again. You add context, then examples, then evidence. Then you tell the whole story, and somehow you're still defending yourself. Why? Because you don't just want to be understood. You want to control their perception of you. You want to make sure they leave with the correct version of you in their head. But you can't control that, and the harder you try, the more power you hand them. Because now their opinion determines how much you have to prove. Some people will misunderstand you honestly. Others will misunderstand you because they already decided what they want to believe. Those two situations require different responses. The first may deserve clarification. The second may deserve silence. That doesn't mean becoming careless with your reputation. It means recognizing that not every misunderstanding is a problem you are responsible for fixing. There is a strange freedom in realizing someone can be wrong about you and you can survive it. They can think you're arrogant. They can think you're cold. They can think you made the wrong decision. They can tell their version of the story. And unless the situation genuinely requires correction, you don't have to chase every interpretation. Because sometimes the need to be understood is just another form of needing approval. And when you stop needing everyone to have the correct opinion of you, you become much harder to pull around. Let them have their version. You don't have to live inside it. I don't explain what doesn't need explaining, but there's a deeper level. Because sometimes you're not chasing their approval, or their attention, or their understanding. You're carrying the entire relationship. Shift 6. Stop carrying what isn't yours. You've probably been taught to fight for relationships. That's good advice, until you're the only one fighting. Look closely. Who starts the conversations? Who apologizes first? Who keeps trying after disagreements? Who reaches out when things become uncomfortable? Who keeps asking, "Are we okay?" Who keeps trying to restore something the other person seems perfectly willing to leave broken? You may call that loyalty. Sometimes it's fear of loss wearing the clothes of loyalty. A relationship becomes unhealthy when one person learns, "If I pull away, they'll come after me." Then distance becomes leverage. Not necessarily because they planned it. Maybe they simply discovered that it works. That's the important distinction. You don't need to prove malicious intent. Watch the pattern. If you stop carrying the entire interaction, what happens? Does the other person step forward? Does the relationship find a more balanced rhythm? Or does everything simply disappear? That answer can hurt, but it can also clarify, because sometimes the relationship wasn't being held together by mutual care. It was being held together by your constant effort. And you've probably done this somewhere. You kept reaching out, kept forgiving, kept restarting the conversation, kept giving another chance. Not because the relationship was healthy, but because losing it felt worse than carrying it. That's where caring becomes expensive. You are paying with attention, time, dignity, peace, and the other person may not even realize how much you're carrying. So stop automatically filling every gap. Let the relationship show you what it can sustain without your constant intervention. If they care, they can participate. If they don't, your effort cannot manufacture reciprocity forever. I stop carrying what isn't mine. And maybe the problem was never that you cared too much. Maybe the problem was that your reactions became predictable. Shift 7. Stop making their behavior your responsibility. This is where people usually get stop caring completely wrong. They think the goal is to care less. It isn't. The goal is to react less automatically. Someone becomes distant. You don't panic. Someone criticizes you. You don't collapse. Someone approves of you. You don't suddenly feel more valuable. Someone rejects you. You don't suddenly feel less valuable. Their behavior can still affect you. It just doesn't get to decide what happens next. That's a massive difference. Because once you stop treating every reaction from another person as an instruction, the dynamic changes. They can be angry. You can remain calm. They can withdraw. You can continue living your life. They can misunderstand. You can let them. They can disagree. You can listen without surrendering your judgment. They can leave. You can grieve without begging them to stay. That's what real detachment looks like. Not indifference, choice. And this is where Machiavelli's broader insight becomes useful again. People respond to incentives. They respond to what produces results. They respond to what gets rewarded. And human behavior changes when circumstances change. So if your repeated reactions have always rewarded certain behavior, don't be surprised when that behavior keeps appearing. If someone becomes cold and you chase, chasing becomes part of the pattern. If someone threatens to leave and you surrender, the threat becomes more powerful. If someone pressures you and you immediately explain, pressure becomes useful. But change the response, and you change the incentive. Not because you're manipulating them, because you're no longer participating in the same pattern. That's the deeper meaning of stopping the chase. You're not trying to make them panic. You're not waiting for them to regret losing access to you. You're no longer organizing your behavior around what reaction you can extract from them, because if your attention is still fixed on whether they notice your absence, your attention still belongs to them. Real detachment is quieter. You stop checking. You stop chasing. You stop constructing imaginary conversations in your head. You stop asking what they're thinking every 5 minutes. You return your attention to your own life. And that's the part people don't expect. When your attention genuinely returns to you, the other person's behavior loses its ability to dominate your internal world. Maybe they come closer. Maybe they move away. Either way, you remain capable of choosing. That's the point. Not winning. Not making them panic. Not proving that they needed you. Freedom from needing a particular reaction. Their reaction doesn't decide my next move. So ask yourself something uncomfortable. What would happen if this person stopped giving you the reaction you've been trying to get? Would you still do what you're doing? Would you still post that thing? Would you still send that message? Would you still disappear? Would you still explain? Would you still check whether they noticed? If the answer is yes, you're still playing against them. If the answer is no, you may finally be playing for yourself. And here's the final distinction. You don't stop caring about people. You stop making their behavior responsible for your emotional stability. You can love someone and still leave them alone. You can miss someone and still not contact them. You can care without chasing. And you can lose someone without losing yourself. That is what changes the entire equation. Because the moment your attention is no longer available on demand, your behavior becomes yours again, not theirs, yours. So go back to the person you were thinking about at the beginning, the one whose messages change your mood, the one whose silence makes you check your phone, the one whose approval makes you feel secure, and whose withdrawal makes you question yourself. Ask one question, not, how do I make them panic? Ask, why does their reaction have this much control over me? That question takes the power in a completely different direction. Because maybe you've been trying to make someone realize your value, when the real move was realizing that your value doesn't need their reaction to exist. Maybe you've been waiting for them to chase, when what you actually needed was to stop running. Maybe you've been trying to become less caring, when what you really needed was to become less dependent on what their behavior makes you feel. That's the shift. You don't become colder. You become clearer. You don't stop loving. You stop abandoning yourself to keep someone close. You don't stop caring what people think. You stop letting their opinions make your decisions for you, and you don't need them to panic. You need your own mind back. Because when someone realizes that their silence no longer makes you chase, their criticism no longer makes you collapse, their approval no longer makes you perform, and their distance no longer controls your attention, something changes. Maybe they adjust. Maybe they don't. That part isn't yours. Your part is what you do next. And once you stop trying to control their reaction, you finally stop being controlled by it. That's the real power of not caring. Not that they panic, that you don't. And if you want to understand what happens before this point, how people actually learn which buttons to press, which reactions they can predict, and how your own repeated behavior can accidentally teach them exactly how to control you, watch the video on your screen now. It's called You're Teaching People How to Control You, because stopping the reaction is one thing. Understanding how you taught people which reaction to expect from you is the deeper layer.